As a church, everyone deserves water, whether or not they're legal, despite all political views, everyone deserves to live. So, Jack here is going to talk about the water stations.
When we did water stations, we worked with a group called Humane Borders, and they took us out. We followed them, and they had a truck, and the truck had a huge tank, like hundreds of gallons of water in it, and they had smaller barrels to put out there. And they had they had stations placed like all over the desert in places where there was a lot of migrant traffic, and they had there were tall blue flags where there was water station, and we would go out to the stations and we would check the levels of like how much water was in the tank, and if it was empty, we would fill it up. But what we saw with a lot of the tanks is there would be knife marks or bullet holes in the tanks, and they would be drained. So we would have to replace them with a new tank out there. Yeah.
One of the days when we were in Arizona, we went to Nogales, Mexico, and we went to the side where the wall was. And as we were walking down the wall, walking along the wall, there's tons of artwork on it. It was made from metal art. They'd made people out of metal, and they'd painted them with all sorts of colors and designs. And one of them even said "vida" in sign language, which is life. And it was just it was so different to go along that side of the wall, and then we went down the side in Arizona, and there was just nothing. The wall was completely blank, and there was barbed wire on the top, so no one could get over, I guess.
Another thing that our group did was we went to the court hearings where they would be deporting some migrants that they had caught. So there were about 100 or so people, mostly men, and some women shackled on one side of the court, and they were shackled with their arms and their legs. For that time, if they're in a situation, desperate enough to want to cross the border where they're needing money and stuff, they need to get home and try to find some other way to work. So they filed by, and all of them just the same verdict. They were all guilty, and led off into a different room. And there were people of all different ages there. There was some people in their 60s and some people, our age, 15, 16. So that was really strange to see that, like all those people from different walks of life shackled up. And also how the people there, like the lawyers that were assigned to them and the security guards by the door, they were so like immune to the sort of emotion in the room, and they just got used to it, and the security guards were like talking about sports and joking, and the lawyers were on their cell phones playing games and not really paying attention to their people.
I have to say that the biggest thing that I noticed there was exploitation. Both in Mexico and in the United States, there were almost all of the employers who willingly employed illegal immigrants were paying them less than minimum wage and profiting from it. And there were also these things called maquiladoras, which are border factories, where they're essentially taking advantage of Mexico's lower minimum to manufacture quite a few goods that are just a little bit over the border, so they're easy to ship back. And the other part of it is nearly all of the drug wars that we hear about in Mexico are fueled by American buyers. That pretty much all of the drugs that they produce are sold to American consumers, and it's American money that's funding the violence.
I have something else. I just thought it was interesting that there were so many organizations down there that we met, like No More Debts and all these things that are about like fighting the issue, like fighting like the immigration stuff, but then there was Humane Borders, which was the organization that was about the water tanks and stuff, and their only thing was keeping the people alive crossing the border. Like, they weren't about fighting the issue at all. It was just, can we keep these people alive? And I thought that was so, like, what a thing to fight for. Like, here's this huge issue, but let's just, we can't fight that right now. Let's let other people take care of that. Let's just keep these people alive. And people were, like Jack said, people were getting rid of those stations. Like, do you read? Like, I couldn't believe it that you're just killing these people. It was amazing. So
the last time we went to work with Humane Borders, we talked more to people who explained their position. And it's not that they don't have a position, obviously. There are ranchers whose barbed wire fences have been cut by crossing groups. And they're trying to get out, and they fix the fence, and it gets cut again, and the cattle get out. So I don't even know, and there are in some areas a lot of things left behind as people start to unload. They can't carry things anymore. They leave quite a mess behind. And I don't know that everybody's objection to border crossers is political. I think in some cases it's just extremely practical. I don't want them crossing my land. I don't want them leaving trash on my land or cutting my fences. And while that's not really widespread, I think it is probably part of the fuel for things like shooting the water tanks. Many of them, and they made a practical decision that it was cheaper to support the water tanks than it was to keep renting the trucks. And so there is some support for this. It's not all, it may be bizarre support.
So they needed government support initially to get this.
Whoever's land it is, they have to get permission. They can't just go do it.
On that note, another big issue is that one of the places that deaths are most concentrated is an Indian reservation down there, and the Council of Elders within the reservation is not letting people put out water barrels, so that has been pretty controversial. Although there are a couple of men within the reservation who continue to do that, but their efforts are being stifled by the council.
I thought one thing that was kind of weird about like what Henry said is the two men that would put out water kind of lost respect, and I think they were kind of leaders among the reservation, but once they started putting out water, they lost all of that within the Council of Elders of their reservation. And I mean, they were still allowed to do it, but they were just kind of looked at as outcasts within their own community just for helping out these people without water.